Morgan Freeman walked into The View with one sentence that ended the show forever. Morgan Freeman stepped onto the set of The View that day with a clear purpose: to say what no one else in Hollywood dared to say. The producers believed they knew what they were getting: a legendary actor promoting his latest project, sharing nostalgic stories, and offering a few sound bites about his illustrious career. What they didn't realize was that they had gravely underestimated him. What unfolded next would turn everything on its head in a way no one could have anticipated. Picture this: the bright, polished studio of The View. Cameras rolling, the audience clapping on cue, and the hosts smiling, expecting yet another predictable segment. But as soon as Freeman leaned forward, his deep, deliberate voice cut through the carefully scripted atmosphere, shifting the energy in the entire room. "You know," he began, "when I was a kid, we didn't see ourselves." His words landed with the weight of a long-ignored truth. The hosts, accustomed to steering conversations and narratives, suddenly found themselves in unfamiliar territory. Even Whoopi Goldberg, a veteran of nuanced discussions, looked momentarily caught off guard. "And when we did," Freeman continued, "we weren't the hero. We were the sidekick, the stereotype, the background." The usually lively audience, often filled with chatter and laughter, fell silent. This wasn't the light-hearted conversation they had tuned in for, but it was one they couldn't tear themselves away from. Freeman pressed on, his words gaining more weight. "The problem hasn't disappeared," he said. "It's just evolved. Hollywood tells the stories it wants to tell, and the history that gets rewritten." His piercing gaze locked onto Sunny Hostin, whose previous comments about black narratives in media had sparked a contentious discussion. "You mentioned black battalions, the soldiers who fought and died for this country, but do you realize how little that story has actually been told?" Hostin opened her mouth, perhaps to respond, but Freeman lifted a hand, not harshly, not dismissively, but firmly. "No disrespect," he said, his tone measured but unwavering, "but this isn't about one film. It's about a pattern, a system. It's about how we've let entire generations grow up not knowing the full picture of our history." The tension in the room was palpable. Joy Behar glanced nervously at the producers, likely hoping for a way to pivot. Alyssa Farah Griffin sat quietly, her expression unreadable. Sarah Haynes nervously shuffled her notes, likely wondering how this discussion had veered so far from the script. But there was no going back now. Freeman was only getting started. Turning his attention to the audience, he said, "Movies and television shape how we see ourselves and how we see each other. But when the only stories that get told are filtered through one lens, what happens to the rest of us? What happens to the kid who never sees himself as the hero?" The weight of his words was undeniable. The applause that followed wasn't polite or rehearsed. It was raw and visceral, coming from a place of deep agreement. People weren't just hearing him, they were feeling him. Whoopi finally found her voice, nodding slowly. "Morgan, you're right," she admitted. "This is the kind of conversation we need to be having." But even as she spoke, an unspoken question hung in the air. How far would The View let this conversation go? Freeman's expression didn't waver. He wasn't looking for approval or applause. He wasn't here to fit into their pre-planned narrative. He had started something, and whether the hosts liked it or not, the tone of the discussion had shifted. What no one realized at that moment was that this was only the beginning. When you challenge the narratives that mainstream media clings to, there are always consequences. And The View was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The producers believed they could steer the conversation back to safer ground. That was their first mistake. Behind closed doors, one question dominated the conversation: would it be Whoopi or Joy? For the first time in decades, The View was no longer untouchable, and someone was about to bear the consequences. Inside ABC's headquarters, the walls seemed to be closing in. The View had always been a polarizing show, but this time it was different. This wasn't just another backlash, it felt like a reckoning. The question was no longer if someone would take the fall, but rather who it would be. For the first time in the show's history, ABC executives weren't just concerned about public relations, they were worried about survival. Ratings had taken a significant hit. Major advertisers were hesitating to renew their contracts, and internal sources revealed that higher-ups were furious that the controversy hadn't blown over. Something had to change. Behind those closed doors, executives were carefully weighing their options. The most obvious candidates for blame were Whoopi Goldberg and Joy Behar. As the face of the show, Whoopi had mishandled the situation. Her attempts to manage the fallout came across as clumsy, and her forced pauses and awkward transitions only made matters worse. Joy, on the other hand, was defensive and dismissive, an attitude that had not gone unnoticed by the public. Now, ABC executives were openly discussing the possibility of their removal. A source from within the network leaked the discussions happening behind the scenes. Serious talks are underway about shaking up the panel, they revealed. Whoopi and Joy are being heavily considered. The rumors spread like wildfire. News outlets latched onto the story, and social media exploded with speculation. Headlines blared questions like, could Whoopi be fired? Is Joy Behar's future in doubt? Is ABC ready to pull the plug? Inside the production offices of The View, the tension was unbearable. Producers tried to keep the hosts calm, but the atmosphere was suffocating. Whoopi, normally poised, was visibly agitated. She hated the feeling of losing control. Joy, meanwhile, was seething. This is absurd, she snapped during a private meeting. Do they really think they can just throw us under the bus and make this go away? Sarah Haynes and Sunny Hostin kept their heads down, doing their best to stay out of the escalating conflict. But Alyssa Farah Griffin? She had a different look on her face. For months, she had been treated as the outsider, the lone conservative voice clashing with her co-hosts. But now, she saw what was coming. Alyssa knew what this meant. ABC wasn't just looking for someone to blame, they might be preparing for a complete overhaul of the show. Inside the executive offices, discussions went beyond suspensions and firings. A shocking idea was being floated, canceling The View altogether. It seemed unthinkable. The show had weathered decades of controversies, but this time, the damage was different. This wasn't just about their reputation, it was about credibility. For the first time, the public had seen The View for what it truly was, a platform that didn't just spark conversations, it controlled them. If ABC couldn't fix that perception, then maybe it was time to end the show entirely. In ABC's headquarters, the unthinkable was now on the table. For the first time in decades, executives were seriously considering canceling The View. A show that had long been a dominant force in daytime television was now a liability. A brand that had survived countless scandals was suddenly on the verge of collapse. This time, it wasn't just about a single viral moment, it was about a complete shift. The viewers weren't just angry, they had lost trust. And the network knew it. Two options remained. 1. Fire Whoopi and Joy, restructure the panel, and try to regain control, or 2. Cancel the show altogether. Both options came with enormous risks. Firing Whoopi would unleash a media firestorm. She had been the face of The View for years. Letting her go would confirm critics' claims that the show had completely lost its way. Firing Joy would send a different signal. Her brash and often divisive style had made her a liability in the eyes of some executives. But canceling the show? That would be ABC's most humiliating failure yet. Backstage, the blame game was in full swing. Whoopi was furious. Joy was in denial. Sunny was weighing her options. Alyssa, however, was patient, watching, waiting. She knew the truth. ABC wasn't just searching for a scapegoat. They were looking for a way to rewrite the show's narrative entirely. Then, amidst the chaos, Morgan Freeman spoke up. Not through an interview, not with a statement, but with a simple post on social media. He wrote, "Telling the truth isn't an act of rebellion." That was it. No context. No follow-up. But it sent shockwaves across the internet. Within hours, it went viral. Millions shared it, and the backlash against The View reached its peak. Suddenly, ABC executives realized the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just a crisis, it was the show's collapse. They knew there was no way back from this. A decision was imminent. Would they fire Whoopi? Would Joy be ousted? Or was this the moment The View finally fell? For weeks, ABC had watched the situation spiral out of control. They ignored the growing outrage, hoping it would die down. But Morgan Freeman's words, "Telling the truth isn't an act of rebellion," sealed their fate. This was no longer just about Freeman, it was about the show's credibility. The options were clear: fire Whoopi or Joy, overhaul the panel, or cancel the show outright. Behind closed doors, the final meeting was heated. A senior executive reportedly slammed the table. "We can't keep this going. We're losing advertisers, credibility, and control." Another executive hesitated. "If we fire Whoopi, we alienate her audience. If we fire Joy, we anger our loyal viewers. If we cancel, we admit defeat." Inside, the views, offices, the tension was unbearable. Whoopi, a veteran of countless controversies, knew this was different. She could feel the weight of the decision looming over her. Joy, usually sarcastic and quick-witted, was uncharacteristically subdued. She had read the headlines. She knew the truth, the show as they knew it was finished. Finally, the announcement came. ABC released a carefully worded statement. "After decades on air, The View will undergo major restructuring. Changes to the panel will be announced as we evolve the show for a new era." The message was clear: someone was getting fired. But within hours, the backlash intensified. Sponsors began pulling out. The outrage wasn't just from viewers anymore, it was spreading within the industry. Soon, it became clear, this wasn't just about firing someone. This was about whether the show could survive at all. The final blow came when an anonymous insider leaked a devastating report. It revealed that ABC had been concerned about the show's future long before the controversy. Ratings had been slipping for years. Audience trust had been eroding. Now, it was undeniable. The View was done. Within 48 hours, ABC made the decision. The View was officially canceled. The announcement sent shockwaves through the media world. Whoopi remained silent. Joy was furious. Sunny was stunned. Alyssa wasn't surprised. And Morgan Freeman? He didn't say another word. He didn't need to. His message had already been delivered that in the end, the show that had tried to suppress the truth was silenced forever.